Welcome to the Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
All right. So, hey, Kilby, how's it going? Welcome to the Ethics Experts.
Hi, Nick. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I've been excited to get you on. Our pre-show was phenomenal. And always when I have a pre-show like that, I know it's going to be a great episode. So I always like to start with like, what kind of kid were you growing up? How did you, because I want to see kind of what some of those kind of through lines are, what some of those threads are through your life that got you into the space that we're in,
Yeah, so I think I'm best described as the quintessential middle child of five. So I was smack dab in the middle of an older sister, older brother, younger sister. We were all within 10 years of one another. So I became the quintessential peacemaker from day one. I felt that set me up for this type of work because I always had a very strong sense of what was right and what justice was, even as a small child. And I was the type of kid that was a total quintessential tomboy. I was always playing sports. I played tackle football until I was 13 in the backyard. I was rough and tumble, loved basketball, swimming, lacrosse, anything I could get my hands on. We were outside playing all the time. And it taught me so much about just working hard and always driving for success. So I felt like my childhood was great. I lived suburban Chicago childhood. We had safe, we were outside, we were playing all the time. It was pretty magical.
What is it about middle children that they have this like oversensitivity to fairness? What is that?
I mean, I don't know. You'll have to ask my parents, but I think it's just a lot of like, you see what the older kids get, right? You see what the younger kids get. You're always kind of caught in the middle. But I think it set me up for success definitely throughout my professional career because I always knew that I could weather any storm, that everything would always pass and you could always have good days and bad days. But all that mattered was your family loved you and you would always work to do the best that you could every single day.
What Chicago suburb did you grow up in?
Glenview.
Oh, cool. All right. It's a great area. So talk to me about how you kind of got on this sort of law path and then kind of into this whole investigations realm where you've really kind of, put roots down in. Like, what was it about law that was attractive to you and what kind of drew you down that road?
Yeah, I'm not really sure when I decided that law was it. It always just was. And I know that's a really weird thing for like a young kid to think about. But I recall in second grade having to write a report about who your mentors were and who your heroes were. Obviously, that was hardcore 90s Chicago Bulls. So everyone's writing about Michael Jordan and the amazing teams and the athletes that we had during that time. And I wrote about Sandra Day O'Connor. So I was the person I always loved the Supreme Court. I loved the law. I had a deep connection to it from a young age. My father was an attorney. My great-grandfather was an attorney. My grandmother actually was one of the first women law students at DePaul University for law school back in the time when women weren't going to law school back in the 40s. So I just always knew that was something I wanted to do. And so if anyone ever asked me, and you can look back at, old projects from being a kindergartner, seventh grader, it was always consistent. It was like, I want to be a lawyer. And that I just always knew that. And then when I got to law school and I had a great experience at the University of Illinois for undergrad, had a wonderful education there, then was able to go to St. Louis University School of Law. And when I got there, I absolutely fell in love with the courtroom. So once I got into criminal law, once I got into trial advocacy, I knew I'd find my home. Those were always my best grades, my best subjects, where I felt most at peace and where I really came alive. So I knew that I needed to probably pursue being a prosecutor because that would get me into the court as quickly as possible. And that's what I did.
What was the courtroom? Like, why did the courtroom, like you said, you came alive in the courtroom. Why? What was that?
I don't know. I just have this feeling of sitting there in trial advocacy, second semester of 1L, and we were doing might have been like a draft opening or a draft direct examination. And I had some great teachers who were judges who oversaw our trial advocacy program there. And I got in there and I just felt like this is what I meant to be. This is what I meant to do. It felt like when you're in the zone, right? When you feel like kind of like when you're playing a sport, right? You're on a hot streak, you know what you're doing. That's how I felt in the courtroom. And that's something I said, I've got to pay attention to this. This is something I love. This is something I want to do. And so I did.
Well, I mean, how satisfying is that? Since you're a kindergartner, you're talking about being a lawyer. I mean, imagine if you showed up in the court and you're like, this is the wrong spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it would have been a pivot for sure. But I was lucky that it aligned, and what I knew in my heart, where I was happiest, was in the well-of courtroom.
So you first got exposed to compliance, I think, in law school, right? At Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Yes.
So what was it about like that experience that really stood out to you, even before you knew what compliance was?
So I was very, very lucky that Tara Dowd Gerber was someone who was looking to bring on some legal externs into the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, or Healthcare Service Corporation in Chicago. And I was lucky to apply and get that position. And it was assigned to the compliance department under the leadership of Ellen Hunt. And little did I know back then that that would be such a great foundation for me to have on my career. So getting to go in and work with Ellen let me see up close and personal at a very young age how important consistency, calm judgment, treating people with respect, and making sure that even in the hard moments, you show up as a strong leader who's empathetic, but also listens and sets standards. And I got to see that front and center at a large corporation from day one. And I felt so blessed and lucky to have that experience. And I think it's no coincidence that when you learn from the best, you want to do the best. And so that kind of set me up for thinking about compliance for the first time, because I had always thought, oh, I'll just go be a prosecutor and I'll go do all of that. But this opportunity came along, and it was something that I thought maybe the healthcare space was something I wanted to get into. I wasn't quite sure where.
Yeah.
And so then being able to have that experience was just, I look back and I pinch myself at how lucky I was to have that.
Well, I think I said this in our pre-call, like if I have a Mount Rushmore of compliance, like she is on there for sure. Like she's one of my all-time faves. I think she is so cool and smart. And, the way you described her as consistent and empathetic and strong leader, like she just is so cool. She's, what a crazy experience that was, though, to, as an extern, get exposed to this sort of like this rivulet or this sort of path that's kind of in the legal path, but that maybe you wouldn't have been exposed to with, like you said, one of the best. That's awesome.
I felt so lucky, and it really did set a great legal foundation of how to understand writing for business and thinking through business objectives. And it was something that I felt really lucky to have at the front end of my career as I kind of pivoted and got back to prosecution after graduating law school. I felt like it was always good to have that in the back of my mind, and it kind of came out in interesting ways throughout my career.
Yeah, I mean, just being exposed to somebody like that, like you said, one of the best, being exposed to that at a time where you're super impressionable. I mean, it just has such an impact, right? Like I'm sure there was hundreds of times throughout your career where you maybe consciously or subconsciously like reference back to that sort of that example, that energy that she has that can, kind of be a guide for you. What were some of the things about, Ellen, that you absorbed? You talked about a couple of them, but I want to go a little bit deeper. What are some of those things that like you think are sort of thumbprints on your own career, or things that you were just like, man, I need to like emulate that?
I think it was how she approached how she thought about everything. So she was really generous with her time and would call me in, and she's short but mighty, right? So I'd get called into the room, and I'd sit there and I would look at her and just understand how she spoke with such conviction. She's the smartest one in any room. Yep. And then she was sitting there having to navigate difficult circumstances within Blue Cross Blue Shield, with the board, with different stakeholders, right? There's a lot of pressures. She was building up that compliance program in real time. And so I got to have a front row view to how she navigated those challenging issues. And it was something that helped inform my legal reasoning throughout my career. So I would watch her kind of distill things, demand perfection in the best possible way, that you would have a draft of something. I was like, oh, this is good enough. And it's like, no, you're going to go back and you're going to do it right and get it better, because that's what we demand of ourselves. And it was just such an experts class, right? That I got to sit at the front row for and learn from every single day. And it was that communicating with your stakeholders, understanding how to do the right thing, understanding when you have to speak up, right? So when you have to say something and do something and really push the business. And then also understanding that sometimes things aren't as important and aren't as critical to your overall mission, and understanding that too. And I think that's something that's not talked about enough. You have to be able to, if you're crying wolf all the time, you're never going to get listened to, but you've got to make sure that you can use your judgment and understand which issues need the most attention at that time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like sometimes, well, I kind of say that, expertise in any field is knowing what matters and what doesn't matter. And like when you're new in something, you kind of think everything matters. As a parent, I remember like, maybe this is getting back to the middle child thing, but like the oldest, it's like panic mode. We don't want this thing to die. And then you like, oh, these are like very durable. These babies are very durable. And so you can lighten up a little bit, and the panic around choking maybe goes down a little bit. But that's such a critical element just to learn early that like, okay, some of these things don't matter. And some of these things absolutely, this hill is one that I will absolutely die on. And this is one that it's like, see work or whatever, I don't get my way is not really that big of a deal.
You couldn't say it better. That's so critical. And it's one of those things that I think in the compliance profession in particular, and investigations as well, we are hired and we are trusted for our judgment. That's it. It's like everyone is smart. Everyone is hardworking. You differentiate yourself in your judgment. And that's something that Ellen had said from day one, Tara had said from day one. And I always took that as such a privilege to be able to watch them and learn, and then realize it as I built out my own teams, that judgment's really critical, and that's what we're here for. And we're not always going to get it right, and that's okay too. But knowing that we're always striving to use our best judgment as we address these really complex issues is critical.
So you had that experience. Where did you go next? What was the next sort of lily pad you jumped to?
So the lily pad was the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. So I was really lucky to get to start there. And I was thrown into the courtroom that first day. We got sworn in, and then it was like, go hit your afternoon call. You walked across the street and hopped into a courtroom and said, it's Kilby Macfadden on behalf of the people. And I'll never forget it. And it was such a privilege to be able to get that in-court experience from day one. It was the best, and I think it continues to be the best training ground for trial attorneys in the entire country. I stand by that. I know there are some offices that think that they are. I really do think that Cook County is one of the best. You get thrown into the deep end, you learn how to swim, you step up, you manage really difficult calls, you handle really tough issues from day one, and you learn from some of the best trial attorneys in the country. And you have a really heavy docket, you have limited resources, and you're there to operate on behalf of the people of the state of Illinois, and there's nothing better. So I felt like that was the place where I said, okay, I can do this. I want to do this. And every single day, my only job was to do the right thing. How good is that? How lucky could I be to be in that role? And I felt so strongly about being a prosecutor in that way, is that's where even on the hardest days, even on the toughest days, you're paid to do the right thing. And that's a privilege.
Yeah, there's like a clarity in that also. It's a privilege and there's a clarity in it. And that's like such a very clear North Star to run at,
It is. And learning from those great leaders and dealing with really difficult cases just teaches you something that you can't replicate anywhere else. And my colleagues that went straight to white collar law firms, and that's wonderful. And that was a great opportunity for them. But I knew I wanted to learn my building blocks from the ground up and be someone that could build on my skills and get better. And you get better with the reps. And with the reps came increased complexity and more difficult cases and judges, defense attorneys. And you just learned so very much. And I was able to do that, for the first 6 years of my career. So
you always wanted to be, you always wanted to be a lawyer. You got your first exposure to sort of the courtroom. You're like, this is it. You get the Cook County prosecutor job, sworn in, representing the people. And you're kind of, it seems like you're in your zone. You're going through this crucible. You're learning so much. What was surprising about that experience? Because, we always have a picture of what something's going to be like. Yeah. And then you get into it and you're like, oh, that was really surprising. Were there any of those things that kind of stuck out to you that were like formative? So
I think the biggest lessons I took from that time was just that there are going to be really hard days. There's going to be really tough days. But that how you handle those days and what you do and how you show up in those tough moments says everything about you, not only as a person, but as a prosecutor and as a leader as well. And there's always going to be really tough moments. Those are going to happen, right? You're going to have an officer who comes in and says, hey, I forgot to drop off this, the response to this subpoena, hands it to you. And then you're like, great, now I've got to go in and tell the judge, tell the defense attorney, and get read the riot act because we didn't have what we thought we had. That's going to happen. Things are messy. Criminal law is difficult. But it was those types of instances that happened, and that kind of gave me the understanding that sometimes you're going to get knocked down, but you can get back up again. And if you're doing the right thing and trying to get it better every day, that's all you can do. I don't know if you remember the old commercial for like, I always say this to my teams is like, weebles wobble, but they don't fall down, right? There were you're gonna wobble, you're gonna have those days, but we don't fall down, we get back up. And that was something that being, down at 26th in California, it's a tough courthouse, it's tough courtroom settings, there's difficult judges, difficult defense attorneys, but you've always got to do the right thing. You've always got to rise above because you're representing the people. And that foundation could not have been better for the rest of my career.
Well, it's such like a kind of a compressed or like highly concentrated sort of picture of what life is at some degree, where like nothing goes according to plan. You have to pivot constantly. You have to be super flexible while keeping your eyes on like whatever the goal at hand is. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And putting on tough witnesses and having that skill to be able to pivot when they say something that you're like, okay, that was not what
I guess we're going left here. Yeah.
I was like, let's follow this road. So your ability to think on your feet, I think it's the highest level of our profession to be able to understand, like you have to do the right thing always. And you're not always going to have the eyes of the court on you. You're going to be in situations with witnesses, with victims, with defendants, and you always have to carry yourself at the highest level and you have to do the right thing. And if there's evidence that comes forward that exonerate someone, then that's the first and foremost. That's it. That's our job. Our job is not to convict. Our job is to do the right thing.
So you said you were in this realm for 6 years. What was it like as you're getting toward the end of that 6 years? What was going on where you're like, okay, I need kind of the next thing? Like did you feel like, okay, I kind of got the black belt, or I've kind of, my learning curve is starting to kind of flatten out a little bit, or you were just kind of ready for a new challenge?
So I was a mom of very young children and working really, really long hours with the state's attorney's office. And at that time, I realized, okay, I've got to make a pivot. I also wanted that challenge of doing more of that white collar work and those vertical prosecutions where you really get in at the bottom level. You're working the cases with your agents hand in glove and then bringing it up for indictment and a review. So I had a great opportunity to pivot and go to the Attorney General's office under Dave Navarro, who's now an appellate justice. He was my boss. We had a great experience. We were able to really tackle some great complex cases throughout the entire state of Illinois and all the counties throughout the entire state, and working on some really interesting, difficult cases. And that's where I fell in love with investigations, because we got to be on the ground level. We'd get some sort of tip or some sort of referral from a state agency, and they'd say, listen, we think there's fraud here. What can you do about it? And they'd kick it over to us. And in the Public Integrity Bureau, our job was to go root out that financial corruption from state actors to elected officials and everyone in the rank and file state government. So it was a really great experience, again, to kind of get thrown in the deep end. I would walk into courtrooms, as you can imagine, in some places in Southern Illinois, and I'd be asked, where would you like to plug in your court reporter machine? And I said, I'm the prosecutor on this trial. Like I'm the person on this indictment. I'm leading grand jury today. And they would be like, oh, okay. It was just still pretty rare to see a young woman who's leading cases, especially in some of these much smaller counties in the state. But again, great life lesson to understand. I'm here. I'm supposed to be here. The state of Illinois has put me here, and I'm doing good work and doing these important cases to protect the financial fisc and the people of the state of Illinois. So it was a wonderful way for me to kind of pivot and still be in the prosecutor lane, but just dealing with more challenging cases and being able to get in at the ground level. So I would take cases from referral all the way through appeal and jury verdict.
So what was different about that experience? Because when you were doing Cook County prosecutor, was it just like a higher volume of stuff? And this now is like a much longer, like you're kind of participating in a lot more of that whole kind of pre-trial process? Exactly.
So when you're a Cook County prosecutor, cases get brought to you pretty fully baked. So your CPD and your Chicago Police Department, and you would get cases that would be referred, and they would be very, it's guns and it's drugs and it's offenses like that.
Here's the evidence. Here's the investigation. Here, just go prosecute it.
Yeah. Hey, state, go prosecute it, right? You can indict it quickly. You can get to your trial date set for 60 days and you kind of go. when you're dealing with vertical prosecutions, that's more of where you have to build the case, right? So you're getting all the information, you're running in the investigation with your agents, you're crafting the indictment, the pros memo, you're presenting the case to the grand jury, and then you're putting the case into trial as well. So you really are just with it from the very beginning. And so that was something that I really loved. So I loved doing the cases and the trials and the high volume of Cook County, but going over to the Public Integrity Bureau, I realized I can help work these cases, make sure they're done properly, make sure that evidence is collected in a way where I know where everything is. And I'm working hand in glove with my agents on those. So it's a slight difference, but it made all the difference to me because it was one of those things that I really got to dig in and really immerse myself as a fact expert in these matters and become subject matter experts in these different types of fraud. So it was an incredible experience.
So I'm just curious, but how would you kind of pick what type of case you would like try to develop? Because to your point, it's not like fully baked. You're like, maybe we should sort of run down this path, or we should kind of pull on this string. Was it something like that?
Yeah, you're just driven by the facts. So you'd get a referral and they'd say, we think there's fraud in this area, right? With the SNAP program, right? A supplemental nutritional assistance program here in the state of Illinois. And they'd say, we have some weird anomalies with this one account. Can you go look at it? And then you'd get the referral and you'd look at it and you'd say, yeah, we've got to do this investigation. So we've got to get the bank records. We've got to get the footage of this person going through the ATM and taking out cash, right? And at the same time that the card is being pinged, right? You build the cases up. You have other witnesses who are there, and you just have to really do the groundwork, right? You've got to do the legwork. You got to figure out what's going on and figure out if there's a violation there. And sometimes there's not, right? And you have to know when to charge and when not to charge. So getting to do those more complex financial crimes and those white collar crimes where it wasn't just guns and drugs, it was a great learning experience for me and something where, again, I got that ignition relit. It was, this is where I'm supposed to be. These are the type of cases I'm supposed to work.
You're thriving.
Loved it. Absolutely loved it.
And how did that, like at that point in your life, in your career, did you have a vision of how this would sort of fit into where you were going? Or were you just kind of following a path of like what's interesting or what was going to give you more tools for some other destination down the road?
I always felt that I wanted to be a federal prosecutor, but to be fair, I thought it was something that was going to be out of reach. I said the federal prosecutors, they're the best of the best. I had worked with my colleagues in the Northern District of Illinois when I was a baby prosecutor, and I was like, these people stood in my mind as giants. And I was like, I could never get to there, right? I was just like, I'm happy to be here. I think this is amazing. I get to work for the state of Illinois. I get to do these complex white collar investigations. And I felt like I was so incredibly lucky. But then the call to be that federal prosecutor was kind of always lingering in the back of my head. And again, at this time, I had 3 children in 3 years. So I had a 2, 3, and 4-year-old at home working and doing these cases for the state of Illinois, traveling all the time. And at that time, the Department of Justice in the District of Nevada was looking to hire lateral white collar prosecutors. So I knew if you're going to go into federal prosecution, you're going to go and start in a more of a guns and drugs unit, right? Where you come in and they teach you and you learn how to be a federal prosecutor. A lot of the time, these are people that were at the law firms for 4 or 5 years, right? Hadn't had a lot of courtroom experience. They were hiring these really brilliant writers, legal minds who they would come in and then would teach how to be prosecutors. But I had already done a bunch of juries and bench trials by this point, and I didn't want to have to go in at the ground level just because of where I was.
Boot camp again, yeah.
Exactly. And not that wouldn't have been a great opportunity, but if I was going to take the next step, I wanted to really have that opportunity to come in and hit from day one as a federal prosecutor handling white collar cases. And so the District of Nevada, as you can imagine, a very robust white collar prosecution environment. There's a lot of fraud there, not only in the healthcare space, but also financial crimes. They have great agents there. So when I had the opportunity again to interview, I threw my hat in the ring. I said, let's see what happens. There's no downside to this. And when I got the call that I was offered a position as an assistant United States attorney for the District of Nevada, I was so overwhelmed and so incredible. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. I cannot.
Yeah. You're one of those giants. You didn't even know it.
And I was so lucky. And I have a wonderful husband, and he said, we can do this. We're going to pack up our 2, 3, and 4-year-old and move from suburban Chicago to the District of Nevada. And we settled in Summerlin outside of Las Vegas. And I started working there, and it was an incredible experience. Again, I came in, got to hit the ground running. I think in my first year, I indicted over 50 individuals. I had a jury trial my 3rd week there, and I was working with these amazing agents who had resources, right? So you're dealing now, not just the state of Illinois, you're dealing with FBI, IRS, you're getting to deal with HHS, all of the DEA, all these wonderful federal agencies who had excellent agents and resources. And we just run and gunned. Like, we worked really hard. I had great partners. We got great cases. As you can imagine, when you talk about the referrals, how did you know what you were going to do? They flooded the doors. We had so many great cases coming in. And every day I just got to learn something new. And you become like a mini expert in each of the areas of the cases that you're working. So I had great mentors. I had great supervisors who are now scattered throughout the federal government. Some are federal judges, right? They were just so amazing. And to be a prosecutor in the Ninth Circuit in particular was great training ground. So to be a federal prosecutor in the Ninth Circuit was, again, when you talk about those times, like getting to work at Blue Cross and Blue Shield under Ellen Hunt during that time, and like getting to go and be in the Ninth Circuit at a time when the law is ever changing, there's so much going on politically. It was wonderful because I learned that prosecutors weren't always held to the highest regard in some of those courtrooms. So it's one of those things where you get in and you're like, I really have to be on my toes here. I have to have everything right and then some. I have to do everything better than at any time in my life. And so you're on the big stage. It's the big game. You've got the ball. You got to run with it. So I felt so lucky to, again, kind of be thrown into the deep end and get to do these amazing cases with amazing agents.
You were on the front lines during this opioid crisis. What did you learn about accountability in the real world with that experience?
Accountability was it, right? That every single day I knew I had to be accountable for the victims of this unreal crisis. And when I got the call from Maine Justice in August of 2017 to be one of the 12 prosecutors nationally who were going to be handling these opioid cases against medical professionals who were overprescribing narcotics and killing people, I felt like it was, again, such a privilege. I was chosen due to my hard work, due to my dedication, and due to the need, right? We simply had to all roll up our sleeves and do what we could do. And when I took that on, it was such a privilege to be able to be the voice for those victims. Those were incredibly difficult cases. They were something that I felt so passionate about bringing to get the justice for the families. And that was something where every day I got up happy and so lucky to get to go to work and fight on behalf of those victims. I worked 24/7. I never stopped. I had amazing agents who were right by my side, and we worked really, really hard to take down those really bad doctors who were killing people. And that was such a privilege and a calling, and something that I'm so passionate about and so proud of the work that we were doing. And there was no playbook to do these cases in an accelerated time frame. We had to figure it out. And Nick, I applied what I had learned at the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, where we have to do a lot of cases quickly. It's an overused term, but I believe in it. You don't boil the ocean, right? I tell that to my team now. We don't boil the ocean. We've got to get the facts that meet the evidence, that meet the requirements for the regulations and for what we need to prosecute based on the statutes. And that's what we're going to go with. And we're going to put these cases together and stop the pills from killing people. And it was such an amazing experience to be able to do that throughout the District of Nevada. I did cases in Winnemucca, in Reno, in towns of Elko, and all throughout, where these small towns that had been crippled by the bad prescribing of some bad apples. And I come from a family of doctors, so I hold doctors to the highest level. I am so reverent of the work that they do for people, and good doctors are the best. So I would find people would ask, how can you prosecute doctors when you come from a family of doctors? And I said, they're the ones that are cheering for me the loudest. They're telling me, go get the bad guys, go get the ones that make us all look bad. And I hope in a small way, I helped reinforce that this profession is so incredibly important, and making sure that the good doctors stood out and the ones that were, peddling pills for profit didn't get to continue.
Yeah. I mean, how rewarding. I mean, there's so much like weight to what you were doing. It wasn't, you weren't pushing papers. You were like fighting against actual wrongdoing, like on the front lines. I mean, that's crazy.
I still pinch myself that I had the ability to be able to do that at that point in my career. And it just was a convergence again of like, I could never have planned that out sitting there in second grade or in law school or anywhere, that this would be the skill set that met the moment, that met the time, that met the resources, that met the issue. And it all kind of came together. And I feel so blessed and lucky to have worked with these incredible agents, these incredible teams, have had the resources to be able to attack these cases. And it was something that taught me something every single day. And I delved in and worked really, really hard. And we had a lot of great success. And it was something that we just every case kept us going, right? There was never enough. We could just keep pulling it off the pile, right? There was another referral, another dead body. And it was something that I just learned really early on in my federal career, that this was really critical work that we were doing. And we'd get a guilty verdict, and the hugs that you would get from those family members was something that I'll never forget.
Yeah. I mean, it really is a crazy thing. We've all been or a lot of us have been touched by that whole crisis, and to like feel like you can do something about it, it's got to be awesome. So what happened next? You went, and now you kind of went corporate after that.
Yeah, so I was at the District of Nevada, and then I was pivoted to Main Justice. So we had so much success in Nevada with our model. I got pulled over to the healthcare fraud section of the Department of Justice Criminal Division. I got pulled in there as an assistant chief, and then I was assigned to run the Appalachian Regional Prescription Opioid Strike Force, or ARPO. So at that time,
the hotbed.
The hotbed, yes, right into the deep end. So I started there in January of 2019, and we got to move back to Chicago. That was great. After 2.5 years in Nevada, moved back to Chicago. And then from there, I ran that strike force with my great colleagues. And as you can imagine, we were working really hard to take down the worst of the worst in the hardest hit areas. And so under the direction of great leaders, including now my current boss, Matt Miner, who was serving as the principal deputy in the criminal division. And this was under Brian Benchikowski and Matt Miner and Joe Beamsterboer's leadership. This ARPO strike force was set up with our agency partners. And then we were able to get a ton of resources to be able to go after the worst of the worst. And then we had that first ARPO takedown in April of 2019.
Wow. So that was the first time you met Miner.
Yes.
And did you guys just kind of hit it off the jump? I mean, it sounds like you were part of a really phenomenal team.
I was. Because of the work I had done in Nevada, I had done a lot of work training other prosecutors throughout the country on what we were doing well and what was working in Nevada. So I had a lot of presentations at the National Advocacy Center, or the NAC, cool, which we have in Columbia, South Carolina. I got to meet my amazing colleagues throughout the country. That was one of the best things about DOJ, is that you were never alone. There were always colleagues throughout the country who could help you solve any problem. So I had been able to meet Joe Beamsterboer at that time, and he was working with Matt Miner, and that was Matt's big project. Matt is from Ohio as well, and he saw the ravages of what the opioid epidemic was doing. And this was a huge initiative that we mobilized as a criminal division and as a healthcare fraud unit with our U.S. attorney partners throughout the region, and dumped a lot of resources with great attorneys and great prosecutors and agents, and were able to make a real impact into curbing the opioid epidemic in the hardest hit areas.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like there's no like opioid issues anymore, but it feels like it's really kind of come down a ton.
I really do believe that, Nick, and I think it was the awareness and taking out the worst of the worst, and the doctors who, and again, there's culpability on a lot of different levels of the pharmaceutical companies and different, jurisdictions. But I will say that being able to take out those who had the pin on the pad and being able to stop the flow of those prescriptions that were being peddled to people that did not have any medical need for them really was something that we were able to attack the epidemic in a way that I can believe with every fiber of my being, saved lives.
It's cool to be a part of that, So next you went, talk about what was next. You put out that fire. Okay. You solved the opioid problem.
No. We had great success. I was able to work and become a principal deputy in the healthcare fraud unit. We were doing healthcare fraud throughout the country. We had strike forces in locations up and down the Eastern Seaboard, as well as Appalachia and in LA, throughout the country. Worked with some of the smartest people I've ever worked with, got to work on really complex cases and drive strategy forward as part of the criminal division. Had great success, but I, again, was traveling every single week. So I'd fly out on Sunday and be back on Monday or be back on Friday. And again, really rewarding work. You're out saving lives. There's nothing better, but realized that as my kids were getting older, I wanted to probably have something that kept me a little bit closer to home. So pivoted to corporate America and was able to get a chief compliance officer role with a Fortune 500 company, which was a wonderful experience to learn how to apply my prosecutorial skills and my regulatory understandings to a large corporation and be able to learn from that. And then the opportunity came last summer to return to working with Matt Miner, who was the vice chair of general counsel of KPMG. So I had the chance to kind of reconnect with Matt and join KPMG as the head of investigations. So I've been here since July.
Very cool. I'm a KPMG guy, so I love that. But what was surprising about that move from DOJ and sort of this, I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but you're doing all this sort of prosecutor work. And then now you're in corporate. What was surprising about that experience of moving in there, and what were some of the kind of surprising applications of this skill set? Because I get that you had some exposure as that extern with Ellen, but you had spent several years now kind of doing other kind of work. How did you pitch yourself to get that job? And what were some of the kind of surprising applications of this muscle memory or these tools that you've built over that, that experience?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was to understand how to approach everything I was doing from the thought process of defensibility, documentation, and fairness, right? And trying to figure out if a regulator's coming, what do we need to have? And again, it's not the boy that cried wolf, right? Saying everything is going to be a huge issue and none of this will work. It's seeing the framework that you have, assessing it, doing those risk assessments, feeling out where we have soft points, where we're good, where we need to put resources, and then approaching it from the fact that you want to be defensible. I would always say when the regulator comes knocking, what do we have, right? What can we show to prove our work? This is what we're working towards. This is why we're doing this. These are the ways that we're addressing gaps, right? No one's going to have everything, and that's not the expectation when they're doing the evaluation of corporate compliance programs. That's not what my colleagues are doing, right? They are looking at it to see, do you have the systems in place? Is there a strong tone from the top? Are you assessing risk? And are you making sure that the regulations are upheld by your corporation? And if you can do those things and do them well, you're going to have the foundation of a really successful compliance program that's going to manage risk and be an asset for your company rather than something that is just, sitting there as an enabling function as a cost center.
Did you encounter either at KPMG people who didn't have sort of the similar experience you had in DOJ, who had tremendous misconceptions about kind of how the sausage is made?
I think sometimes. I think that's fair anywhere. Even when we've been on Ethics First on Thursdays, right? You sit there and people are like, oh my gosh, what's behind the curtain at DOJ and how are these people thinking? And I think if people step back and just look at it from a reasonability, right? No one wants to take a case that's a close call. No one wants to take a case that's going to turn on one fact, right? You're looking at overall course of conduct and you're looking at, is this a really bad actor that's doing harm and stealing from the public fist, or causing people harm, or creating undue risk in a regulatory framework, right? That's what you're trying to look at. You're looking at the worst of the worst. The gray area is not where any federal prosecutor wants to be. It's tough enough to bring a federal case to be in a gray area where you have to convince grand jurors, judges, appellate courts that what you're doing is the right way of thinking about things, that's already putting yourself in a really tough spot. And that's not a place that I think anyone wants to be. You want to be doing the most with the resources you have, and you want to have the most impact. And so I also often say that you want to be in a situation where you're doing the most good with what you've got, right? And those close calls are not a place that you want to be in front of a jury. And sometimes cases happen and they evolve, and they're going to turn on a couple facts. But I'll say that if you're going in as a regulator or as someone who's a federal regulator in particular, you want to make sure that you've got a really bad case and you're putting your resources towards the worst of the worst conduct to be able to do the most good.
Yeah, and I think there's some freedom in that, right? Like no one, and you said two things. You said essentially kind of like you need to pick your spots, and you need to have kind of a genuine sort of like push to try to do the right thing. And then on the other hand, there's this kind of reasonableness, kind of, I don't know, it's like I'm kind of a math person, but that's like the plug factor. It's like, well, is this reasonable? Are we reasonably putting a genuine sort of good faith effort into trying to adhere to these things, or are we trying to kind of skirt the line? And I think those are two very different types of companies. Those are two very different kind of, types of leadership and systems and all those kinds of things. I think that's a very kind of freeing thing to like be able to fall back on. And, again, maybe this is wrong. And if it is, save it. Just kidding. If it is, please tell me. But like, if you're a prosecutor, you don't want to like hang your career or waste a bunch of time or waste a bunch of resources on something, to your point, that's kind of in that gray zone. You want to really double down on, especially if you're going to be building a long case and it's hard to get it in front of a jury. So I think that's kind of a human element, right? Because everyone's building their own careers. Everyone's trying to build their own reputation and their own successes and so forth. So I think that's a much more freeing kind of frame for someone to like solve for the outcome, given the sort of, kind of going back to when the police officer comes in with like a curveball for you, or just like, okay, it's like you have to just kind of solve for what you can with what you got.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Nick. And I think the biggest thing too is the ability to make a decision. Right? It's the ability to look at the facts, look at the circumstance, understand the risk, and then make a decision. I think sometimes there can be decision paralysis in corporate America. Oh, should we do this? Should we do that?
Totally.
There's a lot of consternation. And I think the ability to make a clear decision and then own it, right? And then not be one that's going to second guess your team or second guess the strategy. Yes, sometimes you're going to need to pivot and adjust, but the ability to set that clear understanding for your teams and for your leaders, for your boards, for your stakeholders is so critical. And that's something that I learned on those first days at 26th Street, because you're getting asked, you're like, Ms. Macfadden, are you ready to call the next witness? You're like, sure hope they're in the hallway. Let's see what's going on. And then you're like, okay, they're going to come up here, or something's going to come in differently, or the piece of evidence didn't get delivered by the right clerk. Like, there's so many things. So you just have to be able to make a decision, own it, and say, okay, this is the course of action we're going to take. We're going to put this witness on. Maybe we're not, right? Maybe we did a prep with the witness and they weren't the person that we need to put on for this case at this time. And so you've got to make those calls. And I think that's the biggest thing. And as someone, I've had such great leaders that I've worked for, and Matt is such a good example of this. Ellen was before, is that if you can set a clear direction and initiative, that inspires people. People want to run through walls. They want to walk over hot coals for you. They want to do these things because if they believe in you and believe that you are an ethical leader that has your team's back and wants to do the best for the company, for the people, whatever your stakeholder is, that is something that is so rare, Nick. And
totally.
It's something that when you see it, the opportunity to work for people like that is what I'm most passionate about. And I've been so lucky to be able to have incredible leaders throughout my career who have taught me that every single day. And the opportunity when you take those lessons from DOJ to corporate is that you've got to understand, you have to take accountability. When things go wrong, the blame game never gets anyone anywhere. It's when something goes wrong, how are we going to fix it? Like, come to me. What are we looking at? How can we approach this from a solution-oriented mindset? If we can do that, we can conquer so many things, and we can drive so many great results.
Well, because like nothing ever goes according to plan, at least in my life. Like, it's always a change. It's always something unforeseen happening. And it's always this kind of pivoting to like keep that forward momentum. And like how lucky to have worked with so many, just what you've been talking about for the last little while here is just all these great experiences of working with these other people that have really kind of shaped you and at least given you some kind of formula of what you can try to emulate or replicate in terms of being a leader to your team. And I think you said something there, people will run through walls if they feel like, the blame game's out the window. This is our thing. You're an ethical leader, and they know what they're going to get,
Exactly. And understanding that it's all of us together, but if you have someone who's working in collaboration with you to execute goals and to be there as a support system and to provide the resources and the clear direction, you can do a lot. You
Totally.
can be really effective, and you can have a lot of ability to manage that risk and be able to attack problems as they come. And if you know that you're working for people who are really smart and really hardworking and doing the right thing, that cascades not only in the compliance and investigation space, that's throughout the entire company, right?
Totally.
They're the best leaders are the ones who can inspire that confidence.
Yeah. And, it's kind of that trust thing, and it's kind of like knowing what you're going to get that allows people to kind of drop their guard and like fully engage. That's really what it kind of boils down to from just like a human self-preservation perspective,
Exactly.
So you joined KPMG middle of the summer last year. And something I thought that was really smart that you did was you started kind of going around and doing some in-person trainings. Why was that important to you? And what sort of gap did you see? Like, was there a gap that you saw? Was it something that like, this is just philosophically, you just knew kind of in your gut and your heart, whatever, that this was like the right thing to do? Talk to me a little bit about that, because I think in our space, there's a lot of, again, we talk about this all the time. The level of integration into the business, there's still these sort of walls, the level of integration isn't where it could or should be. There are still these walls up there. The flow of risk intelligence is not like to the level that allows us to really shine in a lot of different cases. And I think that was a really smart move, but talk to me a little bit about that, like philosophy.
Yeah, so the in-person training was something I kind of started when I was just a prosecutor in Cook County and state of Illinois as well. Like, it was one of those things when we were doing different deferred prosecution programs and things that I was spearheading. These were new things that no one knew about. So I was very much of like, let's get on a roadshow. Let's go talk to the officers. Let's go talk to our prosecutor partners. Let's figure out how we can help people understand what we're doing. And I found that was something that was really simple. And I am a huge fan of like low cost, high value solutions to things. And that was a perfect example. So I kind of built upon that. And even when I was in Nevada, starting to do these opioid prosecutions, people didn't really get it, right? So I go to these rural police areas. I would go to the meetings of, police officers throughout the state of Nevada and talk to them and say, hey, this is what me and my team are trying to do. This is what why we're trying to do it. Here's the problem we're trying to solve for. Let's talk about solutions. Does that mean everyone carries Narcan? Maybe, right? Does that mean that everyone understands that we have to, when you're dealing with an overdose death, I need you guys to pull this evidence, right? I need you guys to take the pictures of the pills in the medicine cabinets. If there's prescriptions there, I need you to grab them. And this is why. It was just like explaining to people what we needed them to do. And that's something I did throughout my career. I did that in my prior position where we would go out and just train people about, here's what the compliance department is. Here's what we're trying to do. Here are the risks we're managing for. And to kind of demystify that investigations process. And if you're someone that people see that throughout, and the first time they come in contact with investigations or with compliance, they're not going to have that shoulders up at the ears, oh my gosh, what's going on, right? They're going to be like, oh, I know Kilby. She came and talked to me with her team. I get what their process is, right? So that's the thing we're trying to solve for, is that people understand what investigations is. And it's one of those things, Nick, where, I mean, as you can imagine, you kind of feel like a skunk at a garden party sometimes when you're a prosecutor at a dinner, like truly at a dinner. Oh, I'm a federal prosecutor. Oh, no one wants to talk to you, right? You're someone that
you're looking for your next case or something. Yeah,
100%. And those are stories for another day. But I will say that there are times when, I introduce myself and I say, I'm Kilby Macfadden, I'm head of investigations. They're like, oh, I don't want to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, I use that as an opportunity. It's like, okay, let me tell you what we do and how we manage risk and how we do right by the people of this firm. And that's been something that like you sort of change the minds when you introduce yourself and demystify the process. So currently I'm working with my team on doing just that. So we're making sure that we're getting our Speak Up program out throughout the entire business in the firm and letting people know what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we manage that risk. And I think it's something that as we talked about before, Nick, is like sometimes people think, oh, the number of cases has gone down. How great.
Yeah.
And okay, fair, but let's talk about the fact that when your cases go down 25%, 30% year over year, it's not that the issues are going away, it's that the people's ability to speak up and feel comfortable reporting has been reduced. And when that happens, as you know better than anyone, we talk about it all the time, right? Then you know you're missing the risk. I can't know anything about things I don't know about. And I get frustrated when people are like, oh, this is going on, this is going on. I was like, well, did you report it? Did you reach out? I said, I can't do anything about it. And then they'll be like, oh, you're right. It kind of is changing that mindset. Like bring your issues to us so we can make them better. Give us the opportunity to be better and do better and be able to get you the resources and be able to protect not only the firm, but its people. And I think that that's something when you talked about like what was surprising in the corporate space, that was one of the things that I thought everyone just knew that. And so I'm a huge fan, as you know, of benchmarking. I love the NAVEX benchmarking. I trot it out all the time. I think it's so critical and it's such a great resource. Super excited. I think it's new coming. Our new 26 is coming out like in a week or two, right? And I'm like one of those nerds who gets super excited about it because it's really helpful to understand what our peers are doing, what these measurements are. And it's critical, and you do a good job of talking about this, Nick, all the time. It's like, how do we go to our boards, right? How do we go to our stakeholders? How do we sell what we're doing? They understand risk management. They might not understand investigations, but they understand risk management. And if you can tell that story, we are here, we're seeing the risk, we're addressing it. Remediation is so critical. So how are we identifying the issues that are coming through the door, finding what we're not hearing about, right? When we do that remediation and then solving for that. I hate playing whack-a-mole. My team hears me talk about it all the time. I'm like, I don't want to do whack-a-mole because if we just handle that discrete issue in that one office, in that one place, great. But if that pops up in 4 other places, we haven't holistically solved for the problem, right? So we've got to be thinking, how can we challenge ourselves from one issue and say, okay, let's incorporate this into our training. Let's get a micro training out there, right? Let's do some sort of gamification, make this fun, make this interesting, get people engaged and thinking about it. So that's something that we've really been working on at KPMG. And it's something I'm really proud of, the work and the cross collaboration and that we have. And the sky's the limit. I'm really excited.
Yeah. Was that surprising though? Because you joined an organization. Can you go for a couple more minutes? Yeah. Like you join an organization, it's a bunch of smart accountants, CPAs, all kind of risk-minded, right? Like these guys are finding risks in massive organizations, right? Auditors, all that kind of stuff, that they didn't make that connection between like reports going down and that not being good.
Yeah, I think it's just a framework, right? It's just something they haven't thought about.
It's just a light bulb that needs to get turned on.
Exactly. And it's just telling the story and helping them understand because I can't do the audits that they can do. These people are incredibly intelligent and they are so good at what they do. I'm lucky to work with the best of the best and the smartest people. Again, in my career, I love being the one at the table who can learn the most from everyone there. And that is definitely at KPMG. Everyone is so smart and so hardworking, and these professionals are inspiring every day. And I get to tell the story about what we're doing in the investigation space, hand in glove with our great compliance and ethics partners who are world class, right? So I get to work with the dream team, and we get to work together with resources to solve these problems and get the word out about, here's our investigation system. Here's how we do it. This is what's going to happen. Remove those pebbles, right?
Yeah.
Let people understand what the process is. And we just had this huge exercise on unreasonable hospitality, the Will Gadara book. That is incredible.
Yes. Love that book.
Love it. And
who did that? Who had that exercise? Your team?
So our partners did, and then it cascaded down to us. And then our leaders were great, and they said, let's action this in our group. So we did. So my team came up with, here are 25 touch points, right, that we have with people. It's with the reporter, right, with the people we're doing witness interviews with, how we're embracing it throughout the process, right?
Yeah.
Working these cases quickly and efficiently. What kind of touch points? What kind of updates can we provide? What kind of remediation? And really looking at that white glove service from the very beginning to the very end. And I'm so proud of them because they really embraced it. And now we're actioning on these things. How can we improve our reporting, right? How can we go and say, when you go to kpmgethics.com, like how can we have it be an easy way for them to report, right? How can we help demystify the process so people understand what happens when you do report? And we're working through all these little touch points, and they all matter. So you can always attack one thing at a time, right? And then when you holistically look at it, you improve the level of service that you're providing, and you're doing right by your colleagues. So they feel like they understand what we're doing and where we're going. So could not say enough good things about the book. I have my dog-eared copy to my left that I'm looking through every single day. How can we do better? And I think that's something, Nick, in this space, and you're one of a great thought leader in this space as well, is like, we have to think about it that way. Totally. I think that's something that prosecutors are not good at, right? They're like, you'll hear from us when you hear from us, and you'll get your subpoena to show up and testify, and we'll see you there. That's not how we have to approach it from the business. We want to have those touch points. We want people to feel seen, supported, and met where they are. And that's something, if you can do that well, you can be an incredibly effective internal investigator and someone who can really drive compliance firm-wide. And that's what we're here to do.
Oh man, I love that. We took our whole company through that book, I don't know, a year or two ago. And I loved the idea of kind of bringing that down to all these 25 touch points. That's so freaking smart. Because like, again, to the point you just made about, you don't have that sort of prosecutor's power, that sort of compulsory sort of nature of it. This is all voluntary. You know what I'm saying? It's all voluntary. And like, for somebody doesn't have to speak up, somebody doesn't have to participate in the compliance program. But if you can give them the framework and let them turn those light bulbs on and see, oh, wow, this is really just kind of a different sort of form of risk mitigation, which I live in the freaking risk mitigation space. You can really kind of like mobilize this whole group in a much faster way, to your point, kind of systemically, instead of just kind of whack-a-mole style.
I could not agree more. And that's the thing, Nick. And this ties right back into where we started. I grew up in a household where it was how you did anything is how you did everything. Right? So how you approach waking up in the morning, making your bed, getting up, greeting the day, being grateful for all the blessings you had, and then being able to action on the gifts that you've been given. And the privilege that I had to grow up in a family like that, and to have the support of a wonderful husband and family and everyone cheering for me left, right, and center. Like, I am so grateful and so lucky. And I think you have to embrace that mentality. It's like, you've got to do every little thing right. And if you do the little things right, suddenly you find yourself enacting real change. And you bring people along with you if you bring them into the process. And I think sometimes in the compliance space, it's, oh, the compliance department, they sit up in the fourth floor in that corner and no one ever opens their door and we don't know what the heck they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm really trying to demystify that and say, we are an investigations team. We are a really highly trained group of exceptional attorneys and former agents who are working really hard to protect the firm from risk. We're working hand in glove with our incredible ethics and compliance professionals. We're all under the umbrella of risk and managing that risk, and we're working together. And I feel like this is another moment in my career where I'm at the right place at the right time with the right people to do really good, impactful work. And I just feel so lucky to be in this space. And I love compliance. This is the best. Like, we nerd out about this stuff, right? But we as passionate compliance leaders have an opportunity to bring everyone else along.
100%.
Every interaction I have with anyone at KPMG, if it's someone I'm meeting in the elevator or someone I'm, grabbing a pop from or whatever, like, you can always talk to them and introduce yourself and explain. And it's those little touch points, they add up, right? Someone saying, oh yeah, I met Kilby when she was grabbing a Diet Coke from the fridge and she was telling me all about the great work that they're doing. You've got to just kind of get in the business, because if you're not in the business, you're not able to do your job. And people have to know who you are, that you want to help, that you've got the resources, and that you're going to bring a solution-oriented mindset to the problem. And if you can do those things, you can be an incredibly transformative compliance leader.
Man, I mean, geez, I could talk to you for a freaking another hour here, but it's like, you got to be that bright light. You have to get excited about it. If you're nerding out about it, you have to let that out, and you got to jump in the pool. I mean, that's been a recurring thing throughout your entire story, is you just kind of jump in and you kind of figure it out. And I think there's a certain comfort in sort of sitting in that sort of fourth floor office in the corner, and just pushing the papers around, but that's not going to enact any real change. That's not going to like bend the curve on what this thing can be. And I got chills so many times in this conversation. It's really inspiring. And I just think, You're a great example of the type of energy and the type of mindset that we need to bring to enhancing our programs, because no one's working in a company full of a bunch of people who want it to be unethical, who want it to be a thing that they can't trust, right? Like a lot of us fear, I think fear like, well, I can't trust the company, and, I'm scared to trust the company because maybe I've been burned from somewhere else. But there's people like you in companies that are trying to make things better. And if the people like that can kind of turn the volume up a little bit and turn that brightness up a little bit, who doesn't want to talk to somebody that's excited? You know what I'm saying?
It is. It's exactly right. And I think this space, we are at such a transformative time, and people are investing into compliance departments because they know that they're risk mitigation, right? This is an easy sell to boards and stakeholders. It's get this right, have a defensible compliance program that has a good way of addressing your risk, managing your investigations, understanding, seeing around corners, right? I say this all the time. How are we seeing around corners? How are we anticipating what the next big thing is? We had to do this with AI in the testing space, right? All the CPE exams, things like that. You have to understand what are the interplay, see around that corner, right? Mm-hmm. Understand all the different things that are coming around the corner and doing your best to mitigate it with the teams that you have. And I think that we have so many resources at our fingertips, which we can leverage and do even more. And I love when you say, like, we got to toss this whole do more with less. It's like, do more because we can do more. Embrace, exactly. Right? We are worthy of that. We are strong professionals. We can drive results. Just do more. We can do more. And guess what? The resources come when you've got results. So 100%. Prove those results, get those wins, be able to talk about how you're managing risk, join hands with your stakeholders, listen to them, understand what their concerns are. That's another thing, Nick. I don't think it's so critical. And I learned this in my early days. It's like, you have to listen to what the witness says. You can't just go down I'm going to ask this question, you have to listen to what people say, and then you have to action on that. And that's something that when I'm out in the business and I hear what their concerns are and what they're worried about and what they're thinking about, right? What keeps them up at night? That's something then I'm like, okay, how can we solve for that? What value can we add for that? That's something that can we get ahead of this risk, right? And help them do their job so that they can go out and crush it in the advisory and audit and tax space, doing things I could never dream of doing, but this is what I can do to enable their success and help the firm writ large.
I love it. My gosh. Well, I did call it. I did say this was going to be a great one. What's your parting word for somebody that is like really vibing on what we've been talking about, but they feel a little bit stuck? What would you tell them? Just like one little word of encouragement, or one little kind of push out of the nest kind of a thing,
I think you're one step away, right? You're one step away from what you want to do next. You're one step away from being able to achieve what you want to achieve. And throughout our careers, we're all going to get knocked down. We're all going to have tough days. We're all going to have different circumstances. But if you do the right thing with the right people, you never know when that's going to come up again, right? And I think my career is a good example of that. It's like, if you had told me back in 2008 when I was being sworn into the Illinois bar that I would get to be working at these amazing companies with these amazing leaders and had all this great experience in DOJ and being in the room with all these great decision makers, I would have laughed. I would have said, what are you talking about? I'm just trying to get a job. It's a recession. Like, I just want, I got loans to pay. Like, that's all I'm thinking about. But I think it's really critical. And it's like, don't ever feel stuck. This compliance community is one that we all get it. We all understand. And you never know when that next opportunity that you can jump in. And guess what? You're not going to know everything, right? You're not going to know everything, but throw your hat in the ring, make yourself available, do the right thing, put one foot in front of the other. And you never know when you're going to get that call and that says, hey, I need you on my team. And it can be transformative. So take the next step, keep your head down, work hard, do your best. And if you do those things, it's always going to work out. And maybe a door will close, but a window will open. And you never know. I think one of the very parting words I will say, and I know I'm long-winded, but I'm just so passionate about this, is that you never know which colleague, right, that you're working with is going to become the CEO, right? You never know. There's a guy I sat next to in high school in our advanced program throughout 4 years. And he then ran one of the most successful companies in the country. Like, you never know, right? But you got to treat everyone with dignity and respect. And you never know who you're going to meet that's going to change your life. And if you do the right thing and try your best, I think there are so many amazing things that your future can hold. And reach out to your mentors. You have to hone that. You have to stay in touch with people. You have to do that work. I think a lot of people sit back and go, what are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for me? You got to do for others. I am a huge proponent of lifting up those around me. I have culture, talent, especially of young women throughout my entire career. That's something I'm so incredibly proud of. And you do the work. I was shown that grace. I was shown that support. Chances were taken on me. And it is my job to pay that forward. And I do that with pride. So I feel really, really lucky and blessed to have worked with incredible leaders throughout my career, amazing judges, amazing prosecutors, business leaders, anyone. And you've got to pay it forward and do the right thing. And even when it's hard, just take that next step.
Man, it's so freaking inspiring. My life motto is you can get everything in life you want if you help enough other people get what they want. And it's really that outward focus. And like, how mobilizing is that? Just take that next step. Would you say you're like one step away? That is so good.
You're one step away. You don't know. You might feel stuck and like, I don't know that I can effectuate change here or in this circumstance, but you can take the next step, pick your head up, work your networks, work your contacts, try to
do something, move.
Just do something, right? Like, moving your feet gets you a lot as an athlete. Like, it gets you a lot in the work world as well. And I think I was lucky enough growing up that I had a toughness I love my brothers, but as we discussed, my older brother was an offensive lineman for Indiana University, and we were in a rough and tumble household. You get knocked down, you get back up. You don't cry in the corner, right? Like, that's not going to be allowed. And you have to have that type of grit. And grit is something, Nick, that I think you learn it, right? You learn how to deal with it, and you learn how to.
You're not born with grit. Absolutely.
No, you have to earn that. And so you look back and you're like, I've had some really tough moments. I've been in really tough situations, right? But if you have that grit and that ability to, again, wheels wobble, but they don't fall down. You get back up and you do the best. You put one foot in front of another, and you're only one step away from your next great move.
Kilby Macfadden, A+ episode of the Ethics Experts right here. I love it. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much for joining. This was really phenomenal.
Thank you, Nick. This was great. I love to nerd out on compliance and ethics, and I love the work that you are all doing. Thursday is must-see TV for me, and it's really helpful. I love all the speakers and the content, so keep doing what you're doing, and we're really grateful for it.
Thank you so much.